Welcome to Atypical, the podcast, a podcast about, well, atypical things, I suppose. My name's Simon, he, them, and I'm joined by...
My name is Marianne. If we're doing pronouns, I don't mind either she or they, or I'm not sure, to be honest. Whatever floats anyone's boat that they'd like to call me.
Hello, podcast world. I'm Matt. There you go.
Lovely. Good to meet you, Matt. As you may have heard in the trailer, and if you didn't, then don't worry, you didn't miss much. We wanted to start a podcast looking at, I guess, the world as we see it. I think that it's probably not going too far to say that we are all slightly atypical. Are we sort of happy with that, guys and girls, and anyone else in this call?
Robots also. Craig, is Craig happy? Yeah. Craig the robot? Yes.
Craig the robot is always happy. Yeah. It's just one of the things I was thinking about, it might be quite interesting to talk about, is autism acceptance, because obviously we're coming up to April. By the time this goes out, it will be April, and that's Autism Acceptance Month, isn't it? And I just sort of thought it'd be quite interesting to talk to other fellow people with autism. That always feels really clunky, doesn't it?
Slightly.
Do I have autism, or am I autistic?
Yeah, it's like that picture of a person holding the handbag with a little rainbow infinity symbol has autism, or on the spectrum. They're like on this sort of beam of spectrum, light spectrum rainbow. And autistic is where the whole stick figure is lit up with this rainbow infinity symbol, which represents neurodiversity. Yeah, so usually I think that as far as most of us autistic or other types of disabled people, they usually have, they usually do prefer autistic or disabled rather than person with, because it's about owning your experience. Although we do understand that there may be a particular individual who would prefer to be known a different way. I mean, we are flexible, really, but when it comes to people speaking about us and not actually being us, usually we do prefer autistic, but it's not the biggest issue, people say. I mean, we have worse problems.
But it's being the older person in this group, and language being important. I find that when the argument of whether it's an autistic person or a person with autism, I find the best way to deal with that is label myself as neurodiverse. I much prefer that now, because it encompasses all other things as well that usually come with autism. So, for example, Tourette's, just to pick one out of the hat.
Yeah, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, it could encompass.
So there's a whole load of things going on, and associated things as well, such as bipolar or personality disorder, where there are interlinks. Rather than saying autism, because then somebody will say, oh, so you're Asperger's. And then you have to go through a conversation as well. I find that neurodiverse, and I find that the people that I do say I prefer neurodiverse is, and what's that then? And then that's the perfect response, because then you can go ahead and educate.
Yeah,
you can elucidate. You can, absolutely. So sorry, go ahead.
I was also going to say the thing is that a lot of us do have comorbidities, as they are called. So we might have many things under the one roof of being human. So a lot of us people who are autistic might have ADHD traits and dyspraxic traits, and sometimes seeking a diagnosis for all these things is so exhausting that some of us we don't have the mental energy, but we do fit a lot of the sort of overlap. There is a lot of overlap. So when you say I am neurodivergent or along those lines, it does sort of encompass the fact that you don't really know exactly what your symptoms are, to what degree of what thing, because seeking a diagnosis is such hard work. And once you've got one, it's almost like, oh, God, at least I've got some explanation. Yeah,
at least I've got something.
Some explanation.
I have an excuse. I have a reason.
Because we know that we're not the same as the neurotypical. So it's not like the label has suddenly appeared and we have a label. It's like, I've always been this way. Oh, here's an explanation. Great. Now I can find support of how to manage myself better, deal with meltdowns or whatever. Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think that's actually a really important point to make, is that, and I think this is something which we need to talk about in April, because it's not just about autism acceptance, it's about neurodivergent acceptance. So, I mean, I know I have autism. I also have a diagnosis of ADHD and dyslexia, and I've had PTSD and anxiety in the past. All of these things are part of that sort of neurodivergent landscape.
Yeah, it is like a landscape, isn't it? You've got a little bit of grass, a little bit of trees, a little bit of mountain. Yeah, so I have...
So I guess then the question I would put to you both is, what does autism acceptance mean to you? Why do we need a month about it? What does it mean to you?
I've always thought it to be a bit of a dark horse of humanity about exactly what it is, and then trying to pass that on to others to get them to understand, because ourselves included are always on a learning curve to find out what it's all about. It's there are videos online that will go in depth into telling you what ADHD is, but there are others where study just hasn't been done enough, with some decent results that will give you answers to your questions.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good way of putting it. There's so much information and probably misinformation out there. There's always that sort of mixture of sort of well-meaning people who want to try and put stuff out there, and also groups who perhaps might treat us as a disease, I suppose, almost, so try and cure autism or ADHD or whatever it may be, and we'll come up with these weird studies to try and support that point of view. So I guess it certainly from my point of view, one of the more interesting and useful parts of having an autism acceptance month is the ability for actually autistic people or ADHD people or whatever, other neurodivergent people to tell their stories and to explain to people. So, I mean, somebody said to me the other day, you don't make eye contact very much. And I said, well, no, because that requires quite a lot of sort of mental capacity to do. I find it uncomfortable, so I can do it, but it requires a lot of mental drive to do it. And I'm too busy trying to figure out why you were telling me about the weather yesterday, so I don't have that capacity to go staring into your big blue eyes. It's just no. And I think sometimes explaining these behaviours to people and saying actually they're not. It's not that we're not normal. We're not. We are atypical but that actually what you are demanding of us is not necessarily normal.
Yeah. I think as well about the Autism Acceptance Month is that it's a good excuse for things like organisations and stuff to talk about us because they want to tick some boxes or whatever. But it is good to raise the awareness of what we are actually like. So we're not the math geniuses that sometimes people think of us. We are not the small white boy rocking in the corner or unable to speak. Not all of us are like that. We're all vastly different. And the thing is about acceptance is we want people to accept that we can be so widely different from one another and, different to the neurotypical mindset, that we sort of want to be accepted just like any other person, because we basically are just like any other people in general, because we vary, we have different interests, and we're not all this big monolith of small boy rocking in the corner. There is a lot of that view of, only children have it, or...
I think we can thank Hollywood for those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that acceptance is really important. But when people say awareness, it's not about doing a charity walk in the name of autism. If you want to, you can.
Yeah,
but it's about actually learning what we're like and respecting us and being able to hold a conversation with us rather than judge us slightly. Because sometimes you can feel like a sort of shift with people. It's like a language barrier where they don't really want to... It sometimes feels like you get this feeling that people don't like you, even if you're sort of friendly. It's almost like a language barrier, or you're looking through a weird lens that can't quite get to the other side.
Yes, and I think I think what you're getting there is sort of all the sort of the unwritten rules of society and communities and so forth. And Matt, you've already said that you're the more experienced person in this conversation. I mean, do you think that over the years that this has changed? It's become more acceptable to not understand the rules, let's say, in the workplace?
That's a rather difficult question to ask me. So I'm over 50, and I've only known in the last 4 years. So you get people who are diagnosed now when they're 12 years old, and that's great, and they can have a great life because they can understand the things that they're going to be having trouble with. Whereas I lived with it all the way through, and then finally the light bulb came on very late in life for me. So it's difficult for me to judge an answer to that question, because really, although I'm older and I've had more experience of humanity, I've only got 4 years of knowing, that's why.
So do you think that actually now knowing that's the reason, and you look back at some of the things that have happened over the years, do you think that actually helps to explain perhaps some of the interactions you had with people, and do you think that now that you know, you could make sure that perhaps people treated you in a different way, or do you tell people that you are? And
so I've been telling family, most notably my younger brother, who was the closer brother, and he has said, "Oh yeah, of course, when you did that, which I thought that you were a complete knob when you did that. Oh, that explains why you did that." And now I have. So there is all of that for some people to show them and say, look, this is what I am now, and it was there before, because in X situation I did this, and you all thought that I was off my head, but now you know why I was doing that, and I was being normal, what I considered to be normal for that. So yeah, it's nice to look back on certain things, but what I really need to do now is to not keep looking back, and move forward with what I have, knowing what I have, and developing myself with what I have, rather than so effectively I've dropped all my masks. That I've got a few left, but the dozens have dropped in 4 years. It's been becoming more and more comfortable with life in general, dealing with it. So yes, and acceptance is what I seek all the time.
And I think that's the absolute key. You've highlighted for me the difference between it being awareness in previous years to now being acceptance, because it's as much a level of self-acceptance as it is about teaching others to accept us for who we are.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, and I can also relate to on the topic of routine diagnosis, because I think I've always been a slightly more peculiar child when I was a child. So I would sort of normally play on my own or with one other person occasionally, always someone with special needs as well. And, I had struggles.
I mean, I travelled a lot. I never had friends. So
I barely had friends. I spent a lot of school time without friends. And I could not socialise in group, where other people seem to form these perfect conversation donuts with everybody facing inwards, like they do in Christmas parties at work, all these conversation donuts. I find them so difficult to become a part of, and I've never really been in a successful conversation donut. So I find that there's a lot of that, and I thought, lack of practice, I'll just keep doing it. But the more I did it, the more uncomfortable I felt, and the more stressed out and overwhelmed I felt, and I kept thinking, why am I not getting any better at this? What's wrong with me? And then when I did find out, in 2017, I thought, oh, goodness, yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I had to seek out a diagnosis because I suspected it. And, well, let's say a difficult experience in itself, which we should probably cover what it's like, the pain it can be getting a diagnosis. But then I sort of thought, oh, yeah, of course. Well, that makes loads of sense. Even doctors were telling my parents as I was a child that I probably did have it, but my parents ignored because they wanted one normal child, or particularly my mother wanted a normal child, because my brother has, he is an autistic. So I was always the poster normal child, and that didn't quite work out well. So to this day, I'm not accepted. It's sort of believed in the family, or my mother, that I made it up, or I suddenly decided I wanted to have this label, when that's actually not true at all, because she admitted herself, if a child only eats bread and butter because they can't handle other flavors, some things not, just for an example.
Yeah.
Loads of examples where you look back and go, so I can relate to what Matt's saying about the later diagnosed type thing, where you look back and say, of course it was bad.
While you're on the subject of being understood, I think in general, the awareness and acceptance and trying to get people to understand what it is that's going on, I just needed to add that I've still got an image of a donut running around with me. And can I presume that your social donuts that you were talking about is your visualisation of 5 or 6 people in little small circles in a huge room where they're all having their conversations? Is that because that's exactly
what I meant. Those little circles, but because they have a hole with no human in the middle, that's why I use the word donut.
It was very good, but I'm afraid I've had an image of sugary donuts being passed across the meeting room and all sorts of stuff going on.
You're absolutely not the only one there.
I
because
imagined it too as I said it, but I guess that's what made it seem humorous in my brain as it came out. But hopefully, it got the point across.
And I think actually, I'm thinking about like the acceptance thing, because obviously Sunday the 2nd is World Autism Acceptance Day now, isn't it? Because it used to be awareness and now moving to acceptance. And so somebody sent me a link earlier on to a story from 2017. If you can cast your minds back to before COVID, BC. I know of a barber in Port Talbot who was trying to help a 4-year-old with autism who doesn't like having his head touched. So that does make it a bit difficult to do a haircut. And this barber realised that the child didn't like it, and so sat on the floor with him and asked how they were going to do it, and they worked it out together. So there's a wonderful image, and I'll pop it in the chat for us as well. But it's a BBC News article from April of 2017, whereby actually what worked for them best was they both lay down on the floor, and then the barber could cut his hair. He was happy with it.
I was thinking he'd try and do like a little bob, so he wouldn't even have to touch the head. But yeah, that's really nice that he actually considered the client's needs.
Yeah, and I think it's about understanding and accepting that people are different. I mean, you touched on the Hollywood thing earlier on, where people sort of there's that sort of common myth, isn't there? Autistic people have special abilities. They are. Oh, Matt, remind me the film
Rain Man.
You remember the day that we all went to Buckingham Palace?
Yes.
A number of people came with us, and they weren't neurodiverse, but they wanted to come along anyway because, of course, it was a day in Buckingham Palace. And my friend said to me, what on earth am I going to do? Because I'm not disabled. And I said, look, mate, if somebody in the corner drops a loads of knives and forks, just shout out 42 and you're in.
The answer to everything, yes, 42.
Yeah. That was from a film, but I don't remember the film.
I think it's Rain Man. I think that's what, apart from the 42 answer, but Rain Man does that, doesn't he? Something does drop and he says how many things have been dropped.
Yes.
Wasn't that something to do with the Guardians of the Galaxy as well? The robot who...
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. You're thinking, 42. Although, in fairness, I mean, yes, Marvin the paranoid android, who I always identified with as a child, maybe says more about me than perhaps I ought to do. But I going back to where we were, and this is the problem, of course, for any listeners who don't have autistic or ADHD friends. We do bounce all over the conversation. We can keep up. I certainly know that talking to my family, my grandfather said to me once that after an hour or so of being at the dinner table, he's exhausted trying to keep up with me because my brain goes off in all sorts of different directions and bounces around.
And the thing is with us is that we can either stay silent, some of us, autistic people, we can either stay silent in a group of people, or we can just get so comfortable if there's few enough of them and we know them, that we just as you say, bounce around conversations so much and all sort of accidentally interrupt each other because we can't quite pick up the signals of what's the difference between a pause and a full stop. So we all sort of, it's like following, in this case, 3 very bouncy rubber balls bouncing around a square. We all manage to know more or less what's going on, but other people that are sort of new to the meeting go, oh, goodness me, why are these people speaking so much or something? And I guess it's also part of that acceptance of realizing that some people do accidentally speak quite a bit or not enough, or we all have different levels of speaking and, each to their own. Really?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that puts it very well. It's not about us wanting to trample all over what people might see as being like the norms of conversation or groups or whatever it be, but about accepting that they might get a lot more out of us if they allow us to be ourselves. I mean, it's something we've talked about before, Matt. Is about when you get shut down because you're not using the right tone of voice, or you're not following the prescribed way of speaking in certain situations.
I think autistic people and rude people don't get on. So, like, sometimes feelings can get hurt because we're trying so hard to be nice and to make friends and stuff, because we do like that. We are human. But sometimes we get shut down in such cruel ways where people don't realize that who they're talking to actually does have feelings. We do have feelings, and we're trying to be nice, trying to be friendly. And so that sort of rejection thing as well, that could also be as we've said, that there's so many comorbidities. I also have, like trauma, anxiety problems and that sort of stuff, social anxiety, and the type of anxiety that's quite strong. So many traits.
Oh no, yeah. I'm sorry, Marianne. You can't have any of those things because autism is a male-only condition.
Oh goodness me!
Haven't you heard?
So that psychiatrist that told me I can't possibly be autistic because I left the house. She must have been right. Yeah. That means I can't possibly be.
But that also means that Matt can't be because he's not a child. Only children have it.
And what are you doing here then if you're not a child? Let's just end this call because none of us are small children.
Yeah, we've solved it, haven't we?
We've found the cure.
Sorry, Matt, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
You asked me a question some time ago that I haven't answered yet, but we go, like you say, we're going off on tangents here. Marianne, what did you just say? Because I've lost my train of thought.
We found the cure, being sarcastic, the cure is to grow up or be a female.
Yes.
Sarcasm, of course.
Yes.
Because there are so many stereotypes that are still much stronger than what we would hope.
I've lost a lot of my positions in Facebook groups because any mention of autism, just like, well, you can't be autistic because you're not a child. And along that line, they don't actually say that, but along that line, nobody seems to realise that autistic children turn out to grow up to be autistic adults.
Exactly, yeah. So what was the question that you were going to answer? Sorry?
I can't remember. You had to ask Simon what the actual question was.
Conversations we've had previously about being shut down, especially in the workplace, when you don't prescribe to a particular way of dressing or of speaking, or even just being told off for using the wrong tone.
Certainly I've been told off for the way I dress. I like flamboyant colours. That if somebody was known to be gay and dressed in a way that would be free and open, it's perfectly acceptable. But when you do, because you're a person who will back down when somebody approaches you, or you'll just accept it, which was what happened in my case, where I was pulled up for wearing a paisley shirt to work, and reminded of the uniform policy, and by a manager who just really didn't understand what was going on, and wanted to rein all of his employees in. That becomes rather difficult. But back to the main point of the question is meetings.
Yes.
That's the things that I hated the most, is when pre-COVID, when you used to go into a meeting room and meet up with all of these people, and everybody's got to have their say, and you just sit there at the corner. I quite often went through the meeting without saying a word because I couldn't be bothered to try and put my penny's worth in. There were too many typical people there who just wanted to polish their egos in front of each other, whereas I was there to give data, and I couldn't be bothered.
Yes, and I think that's actually a really, really valuable point as to why it's important that we need to spread the idea of actually autism acceptance, and to help typical people to understand that actually they might be shutting out someone who has the data, has the answer, and can stop this meeting after 5 minutes, not them going around for an hour whilst Matt sits there going, they're not going to listen. I can't be bothered. And I think that's incredibly important part of actually why we need to break down some of these myths, but also some of those sort of very rigid societal expectations of how you should behave in situations. And I mean, I love the point of the paisley shirt. It's like, oh, but we've got a uniform code. It's like, did it stop you from doing your job by wearing a paisley shirt?
I was picked up on my uniform, on the things I wore, and the uniform policy, to which I found out there wasn't one. But I suspected anyway, but I had to go there and discreetly tell the manager and say, oh, by the way, we don't have a uniform policy. And he pulled me up for getting in consistently at 9:10 and said, we're going to have a word and sit down and work out a new contract for you because you're persistently getting in 10 minutes late. And that's when I went to look up the key,
core hours.
Core hours, and reminded them that the core hours are between 10 and 12. So, in fact, I'm getting in 45 minutes early every morning. So, and that was another one as well. And I had to do that discreetly. But that manager didn't like the fact that I did it discreetly. One time when he posted something to the whole group and said, oh, you can't do this because he quoted a code. A process in the staff employee handbook. And I replied to all and said, no, you can't use it for that one. What you need to use against us is this code. And of course, we love
it.
The fact,
telling your boss how to...
Giving him the true facts about what it really is. And I just ended up alienating myself against my colleagues and my manager.
I think your manager does sound like a piece of shit.
His son had ADHD. I didn't understand why he was so negative towards me, and I suspect it was because he was quite flamboyant and open and look at me, I'm lovely and I'm important, and because I was coming out of my shell and becoming a bit like that, he saw me as a threat.
I'm going to do the hauling us back thing.
Yep. Drag us back.
Do you mind if I jump back into the meeting conversation?
Yes, that's what I wanted to come back to. Yes, absolutely.
So something that was beneficial to previous managers before the one I'm knocking about at the moment, some of them were very good and some of them recognised my talent, and I was asked. You could see her looking at me and asking all the people around the room for their opinions, and they were giving their opinions there and then on a policy change or, how can I do this better or whatever. And it came to me and she said, Matt, what do you think? I was the last to be asked, and I said, look, do you mind if I get back to you on this one? I think I might have an answer for you, but I need to just find a few things out. And that was the typical ADHD thing where I've got to consider every possible outcome and every possible person before I can give an answer. I had an idea there and then, but until my mind was settled with the answer, I couldn't do it. And invariably, that manager accepted many of the things I did into team policy because It was, in fact, the better option and the more thought out thing. Everybody wanted to polish their egos in the meeting and let them know, oh, yeah, well, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. None of it was thought about. And there was I thinking, right, okay, yeah, I've got an idea and think. And then get back to the following day with the answer that everybody else really should have come up with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that, again, is part of why, for me, autism acceptance is a really important part of the the yearly cycle, is that we can use examples of this and say, hang on a minute, we're not necessarily Rain Man, we're not going to go off and be all systems thinkers on robots and so forth, but I think our experiences and the way in which our brains work is incredibly valuable to organisations that want to listen to us, because we will look at it from that slightly different point of view. And it helps to break that group think thing. So, I mean, you just described there, they've all just been pruning their egos and thinking about it for an hour, whereas actually you said, give me a day, I just need to, work through all of the bits and pieces. And I'm sort of, unfortunately, you had the donut thing earlier on. I'm now picturing you with lots of bits of paper and red string on a big board to try and work out, how it works. And I think actually it's challenging the views that, autistic people are only interested in trains. Well, actually, we're interested in other things as well. We want to make systems work. We want to try and fix a problem and use us, because we will look at things differently. Yeah. That's how I see it. For me, that is at the core of acceptance, is not just, fine, get on with it, but also you show me how we can benefit from making you comfortable and allowing you to grow and thrive within our workplace or community or friendship circle or whatever that may be. For me, that is the important part of it.
Yeah, I think I also really relate to that, checking an email before you send it about 10 times, reading it over and over and over to see if it sounds the right tone, delivers the right amount of information, sent to the right people, all that stuff. How do I monitor my tone of voice type thing that's going to make my answers quite well thought out, but maybe take a bit longer? And some of us do have that. I've heard from other autistic people that they sometimes have issues with perfectionism, and they'll just keep going over and over again, looking at things, making sure that they're, perfect to their own standards and stuff.
I agree with that. Most definitely agree with that. Trying to put something out that's correct, and no matter how many times you go through it and check it and make sure it's right, once it's gone, you'll notice another mistake. Yeah. Pray to God. And it's so obvious to us. It's so obvious. Look, that on the page 42, I put a comma in instead of a full stop halfway through a paragraph that no one's going to read, but you put it out and you say, oh God, it's so glaring, and nobody notices it, and you can't understand why nobody's noticed it and rung you up and called you how incompetent you are. It's amazing, isn't it?
I've had a lot of people, like managers, doing tone policing, though, for me, because I'm so, hello, please find attached this, blah, 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 blah. I don't know. I try and be factual, but I've been told that I come off as occasionally passive-aggressive when that's absolutely not my intention at all. So, for example, I was warning some people on our work social network about a potential allergen, there was conflicting information. And I said that unfortunately there's been an error. There are two conflicting labels. So do bear in mind, if you have an allergy or you don't like milk or whatever, any sort of intolerances or ethical views, anything like that. And my manager took me into a meeting room and told me that I should remove my post because it comes across as passive aggressive and could offend the people who work in the catering. And I thought that is quite over the top.
Yeah, that's a little bit over the top, really, isn't it? You're providing a public service there and helping out a colleague, and their instant response was you might upset.
I'm back to donuts again.
Yeah, I only said there's a mistake. I didn't
knew you would
say anything mean.
I mean, I know an army marches on its stomach, but occasionally you can say these things. And but this is you make a good point. I mean, the tone policing. I've had that in the past where people have told me my tone is not right, or I was in a meeting not that long ago where somebody told me I needed to have more decorum for the meeting.
Me, you've got so much decorum.
Which Well, well, thank you so much for most kind.
I dropped my hat.
I sometimes feel that the sort of the way in which people gatekeep, and we're going to use meetings again because we've already talked about that. Gatekeep the way in which you should turn up to a meeting and use effectively ableist language to shut down anyone who is not typical. Straight down the middle, wearing their tie, who has said good morning in the right way.
Oh, goodness, yeah. I say hello instead of good morning and good afternoon and all that because it's like there's so much mental energy of, oh, good morning. How was your weekend? Oh, yeah, I had a chill weekend. And all that stuff that the neurotypical people talk about. Oh yeah, I went on holiday. Oh, it was
yes, I want to know all about... But you have to remember they can't help themselves because they're all obsessed with football and they must show you all the pictures of their children at all times.
Yeah.
And
we must feel sorry
wait
for
a
them.
minute, what does that sound? They have only like single interests and they will wear T-shirts about their interest with with logos that are special to them on it. And hang on a minute, who else do they talk about? Might have like obsessions on a single topic and we'll talk about them endlessly and only really go about that rings a bell.
Does, doesn't it?
What do you think, Matt? Can you think of anyone who does that?
What they say about us? What do they say about us? Yeah, we do get that whole special interest thing, but I mean I have a few special interests, but I don't bang on about them at work like these people go, oh, did you watch the game last night with the this team and that team? Like nobody.
You've covered both subjects of what office life is like. It's sport. It's either football. no, it's not either football. It's football. It's football.
Yes.
Occasionally, you'll get somebody who's into Formula One, or you'll get somebody who's into rugby. Or when the tennis is on, there will be some discussion about the tennis, but it is almost all about football. And when there's no football on the telly, we're talking about how we're going to build up to football. And
it is very mono.
If it's not football, it's about what was on telly last night, and it's usually something I have avoided.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like Love Island and what other
Love Island.
Rubbish.
X Factor.
Yes,
in all those television Big Brother and all that. Never find those interesting. Any reality thing, unless it's like you're discovering something, you're learning, a documentary maybe. Learning is always interesting.
Yeah, I think we're always, and that's I like that idea. We are always learning and we're always trying to do better and to be better. And I think there is a great power in having typical allies who will say, no, be you. You do not have to conform to, this jelly mold. Right. You can wear your paisley shirt.
Our chair lady, she is really good at, acknowledging when we support her, calling out good things, even sending us awards through the system, which are official thank notes, and just actually saying, thank you so much. And these kind of things, like, they really make you feel like, oh, I'm valued as a human. And our chair lady is quite good at promoting what we stand for, nothing about us without us and all that sort of thing. So we don't want people saying, oh, those oughts.
Yeah, but everyone is a little bit autistic.
Oh, yeah, that's what they say, isn't it? That's one of the myths on my Mythbuster.
Oh, yes, they're all on the spectrum, and only if they're male. That's crucial. We have to remember here.
Oh God,
yes.
There's so many stereotypes. That's why I'm looking forward to the Mythbuster when it comes out, when we publish it. When the chair lady is off.
So, what? Tell us a couple of common myths, Marianne. What are common myths about autism?
Off the top of my head, let's have a look. Off the top of my head is a little bit challenging. Let's say, for example, we're all math geniuses. The fact of that is, of course, not really. Some of us might like math, some of us might not like maths. When we have something we like, we try and learn more about it as much as we can because we really, really enjoy it. But that is not always math. If someone asks me a math sum on the spot, I feel the need to get a piece of paper out or something like that. I'm not like a math genius. My brother, also an autistic person, not a math genius. You two?
I love numbers.
Math genius. Numbers are great. Yep, numbers are great.
I love numbers. I'm fascinated by pi. I'm fascinated by
algebra and all that.
All that sort of stuff.
Like
you're back on the donuts again, aren't you?
I can't play darts to save my life because of the calculations required.
I can't add up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do mental arithmetic as amazingly as a math genius could. I mean, maths, when I was in school, it was like a little bit of a pain point, but I did pass with some extra coaching. But yeah, I think that's one myth. And for example, another myth, let's say, is that we're all rude. We've got, no social skills. We never do eye contact. We're just, rude and that cold, don't have empathy. And we can be pretty polite and nice if you get to know us, if you give us the time of day. And also those people that are rude to you, any neurotypicals, if you've experienced someone who's rude, that's probably not necessarily an autistic person before you go and say that person must be on the spectrum. That's not something that someone can tell unless you actually ask them, because autistic people, much like neurotypicals, they vary between nice, okay, not so polite. We all vary. I mean, most of us try and be polite and friendly where we can, just like everyone else. But yeah, we're not all.
Yes, absolutely.
Not all rude assholes or rude, horrible people. But sometimes we might not like eye contact. We might try and look at the mouth to see where the words are coming out, maybe try and lip read a bit. But eye contact does feel a little bit too intimate sometimes.
Can I add something about eye contact?
Please do, yeah, absolutely.
Many years ago, before I knew about neurodivergence, somebody had said something like, if you want to have a proper conversation with someone, you need to keep eye contact. And you don't. You look away, you need to keep eye contact. So I taught myself to stare at the eyes in meetings because it's the only way. So now I've altered the behaviour since, but I then went the full opposite. So I would hold a conversation and occasionally look at the nose, back at the eyes again. And in most cases, people tended not to look at me as much. So it was me who made them feel uncomfortable. And I got quite a few reports back, mostly from females, that I was creepy.
Oh, okay. Well, because the way you were sort of...
I was trying to... Yes, diversifying, being not myself, keeping eye contact. And in fact, what I was actually doing was I was never looking at the eyes. I was looking straight through. It was the only way I could deal with it. Okay, and of course, that gave this translucent, weird, odd man is looking at me.
Yeah. As a person who has met you in person, I did notice you do sometimes stare through, but I just attributed that to, autism makes each person look at another person slightly differently. And I think we sometimes have experience of horrible people staring at us in horrible ways, so we sometimes might have a bit of a heightened fear to that. So even when it might be something else, like what you've described, we might get an alarm, but like a false alarm. So that's probably just an unfortunate side effect. Yeah. But I mean, I understood what it was. Yeah.
Hello, Future Simon here, currently editing the podcast. Unfortunately, during the recording, we lost a couple of minutes of conversation after Matt's point about eye contact, and we moved on to another discussion about sensory needs. We rejoined the podcast just as somebody asked about rayon. I think rayon, but it's and I think part of the acceptance thing is about teaching those around us that sometimes we need the lights to be down a bit lower, or we will jump when there is a loud noise,
or scream,
or precisely, and actually sometimes some clothes or types of clothes are just so uncomfortable to us. We can't actually focus on anything else until we wear something different, and how that interacts with uniform policies that may or may not exist, or you can't see me doing the air quotes, which is always a difficult thing when you're, because this is primarily an audio medium, so people can't see me doing air quotes, but imagine I'm doing air quotes.
I can.
And you must behave within this very rigid set of rules. Thou shalt wear a suit and tie to the office. Why?
Exactly.
And I think it's not just sort of part of helping people to accept. It's also, I think, there is a role for us to challenge people's preconceptions, and that's why I think things like sort of myth busting is actually a really powerful tool. It enables us to say, actually, guess what? Yeah, I get on the train. I don't know if it's a 345 or a 701 or it's a train. I get on it.
Yeah, we all have our different interests, don't we?
And I think being able to challenge people who just automatically make assumptions, oh, you're autistic, therefore you must, be this, that, or the other. And for me, again, coming back to the Autism Acceptance Week, I think that's sort of an important, month, is an important part of where we go next.
Yeah. I guess another myth as well was the fact that we don't have empathy or anything like that. Whereas, I'm sure we all know.
Yes.
Sure we all know that we actually do have empathy, and some of us have quite a lot of empathy, but the way we show it sometimes might be different. So, for example, if one of our friends or family has got a terrible day, they're crying or angry, we might go a bit quiet, typically offer them some water, ask if there's anything you can do to resolve their problem, but not immediately go and dive in for a hug, start stroking their hair and go, oh, it's okay, I'm here for you. Anything you need, night and day. Where we're actually, some of us might show it in a different way, like saying things like, okay, so this happened at work or, in this. So, have you tried this? That might work. Or did it go like this? Perhaps it's not your fault at all. Maybe that person is in the wrong. So you can at least take comfort in the fact that, you're right. Or we might try and do it in a sort of technical way where we actually don't want the person feeling sad at all. We don't instinctively dive in for the hug like some people might expect.
So I think what you've done there is outline what we should do for our next episode.
Okay.
I think that there's what do we reckon? Maybe something on empathy and theory of the mind. That's always an interesting one. I
shall have to bring a box of tissues.
There are some
for all the crying.
Please do. There'll be, because there are some pretty horrific studies out there, and I feel a bit fighty for this month. Yeah. I think we need to start tearing down some of the assumptions that have been made in academic and medical circles as well as in more personal ones. What do we reckon?
Yeah, we should get a bit fighty, I think, because
excellent.
Nothing without us, isn't it?
I look forward to it.
There is. Yes. Well, we've been casting for nearly 55 minutes now, so I don't know about anyone else, but I could do with a beer. So I think we'll sort of we'll bring it to a close there, I think. And if any listeners have made it this far, congratulations. And as you just heard, what we would like to do is we'll put up another episode in a couple of weeks where we will talk about empathy and theory of the mind. We may be joined by more people, which would always be lovely. And yes, so I just want to remind everyone that Sunday is World Autism Day, World Autism Acceptance Day, I should say. Yeah. And the whole of April is World Autism Acceptance Month. And I think it'd be quite a nice sort of a challenge for anyone who's listening is to think of one of the myths around autism and neurodivergent behaviours in general. Are you autistic? Do you have ADHD? Do you know someone who does? Challenge one of those myths. See if you can help us build a better world and a less judgmental one where we can all actually be our own authentic selves. Any final thoughts from either of you?
Definitely agree on that. Yeah, definitely want to challenge those myths and help us be our authentic selves. So we don't always have to mask everything we do and get home really exhausted, feeling like we've just spent way too much effort pretending to be normal or what they should perceive or what they perceive as normal. Trying to live up to those expectations is exhausting.
I was just thinking that if anybody out there has got a T-shirt or a shirt that they can't stand wearing because it's bright pink or it's a colour that you don't get on with, wear it for a day and find out what it's like with everybody staring at you.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
So, yes, there you go. You've got it there. You've heard it here first. Wear that T-shirt you never thought you would wear. And I suppose also just, think about how you can do your bit to try and make this world a little bit more, I suppose, inclusive for other atypical people. I'm going to draw it to a close there. So thank you so very much to both Matt and Marianne who have joined me this evening, and I hope that you will join us for episode 2 on empathy and theory of the mind, where we will hopefully have 1 or 2 extra people to join us, so it won't just be us. And we look forward to it. So until then, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.